Travel by air is generally considered a safe, speedy, and effective method. But when the massive metal structures flying thousands of feet above the ground malfunction, the results are devastating to say the least. Whenever a plane goes missing, or even temporarily goes off the grid, almost everyone on the ground starts panicking. This is because, in such a situation, people think about the worst-case scenario, which is a plane crash. There have been several devastating plane crashes in the last few decades, and in most of these, there were no survivors. But in the case of a crash, people are aware of the outcome. However, when a flight goes missing and is never found again, it's even more nerve-wracking. The mysterious disappearance of these flights remains unresolved most of the time, and the friends and family of people on board never really get closure.
We believe family members should prepare themselves for the worst.
One such harrowing case is the disappearance of Santiago Flight 513, which went off the grid and was never seen again for more than 30 years. The history of world aviation has witnessed several strange disappearances over the decades. These traceless vanishings have become a real deal over time, and the mystery surrounding them keeps people forever in doubt. From the unprecedented death of the infamous female American aviator Amelia Earhart in July 1937, which prompted the US Navy to deploy an extremely expensive search in the Pacific Ocean, to the mysterious disappearance of 5 Grumman TBF Avenger torpedo bombers belonging to the US 19th Squadron over the Devil's Triangle of Bermuda in December 1945, there have been some incredibly confusing disappearances that remain unsolved. Not long ago, a Malaysian plane, MH370, also went off the grid and was never found again.
The Malaysia Airlines flight with 239 people on board, including 4 Americans, has gone missing. At this hour, a desperate search is underway for MH Flight 370, which departed Kuala Lumpur at 12:41 a.m. local time and was due to land in Beijing at 6:30 a.m.
Unlike the rest of the aircraft that never made a comeback, whoever hears about the mind-boggling case of Santiago Flight 513 thinks it's a plot from a science fiction movie. After all, what happened to it cannot be explained any other way. For several years, the miraculous tale of this fateful flight has been circulating on the internet, with many sensational headlines like Pan American Flight 914, took off in 1955 but landed after 37 years, or DC-4 aircraft disappeared in 1955, landed after 37 years, or 1950s airliner lands with 92 skeletons. All these titles describe the same incident, which seems to have inspired the hit Netflix show titled Manifest. The incredible story of this disappearing airplane was published as breathtaking news by the Weekly World News tabloid for the first time in their November 14, 1989 edition. This tabloid featured a report by a newspaper reporter named Erwin Fisher. In the feature, he confirmed the sketchy details about a missing Santiago Flight 513. At the time, no one was sure whether it was actually conclusive news or just a sensational hoax. The question was this a real flight that went missing, or was it all just made-up mumbo-jumbo? According to Brazilian aviation authorities, a commercial airliner named Santiago Flight 513 did actually take off from Aachen, West Germany, on September 4, 1954. The airliner vanished while it was flying somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean and was never heard from again. A large-scale but mostly futile search was conducted by the authorities for a while in order to find out where the flight went. Despite extensive searching, they couldn't find a single piece of debris. When they didn't find any signs of the vanished aircraft or any answers, the investigators had no other choice but to concede that the plane most likely crashed and drowned in the Atlantic, and all passengers on the plane lost their lives in the tragic accident. For most skeptics, this is a good enough explanation, and they don't find anything off with the details of this gut-wrenching incident. However, the story of Santiago Flight 513 didn't end there because, according to reports, the missing plane allegedly reappeared and was seen circling the airport of Porto Alegre, Brazil, on October 12, 1989. Soon after, the plane actually landed, and what the authorities found inside was downright baffling. According to the airport officials, the control tower had no communication with the missing plane that circled the airport area and eventually landed. After they went to check on the plane and opened its doors, air support and security were shocked by the gruesome sight they discovered: 92 skeletonized bodies inside the aircraft. The skeletons included all 88 passengers and 4 crew members. All of them were sitting in their respective seats. Even more mind-blowing was the fact that the skeletonized pilot of Santiago Flight 513, Captain Miguel Victor Curie, was also sitting in an intact position. He was still apparently clutching the controls. The staff also noticed that the plane was still idling for some reason. The officials refused to comment on or talk about the bizarre reappearance of the missing Flight 513, and they had absolutely no clue where the plane had been for the intervening 35 years. When Santiago Flight 513 took off from Germany, it was scheduled to arrive in Porto Alegre 18 hours later. But unfortunately, it never made it to its destination. However, on the fateful day in 1989 when it reappeared, the air traffic control tried to contact the pilot several times, but got no response, which is understandable owing to the condition everyone inside the plane was found in. Everything else in the plane was intact to perfection. Although 35 years had passed, not a single object or part of the plane was found to be damaged. Everyone was confused by this, and the media was eager to find answers. That's when a paranormal researcher named Dr. Celso Atello came forward with his theory. Atello said that Santiago Flight 513 had most certainly entered a time warp. He also said that there was no other explanation for this extraordinary incident. Atello, however, didn't seem to have any further explanation as to how it happened and why the passengers and crew turned into skeletons. He also couldn't explain how the skeleton of the pilot managed to land the plane safely. Santiago Airlines allegedly went out of business in 1956. All their executives, who are still alive today, don't seem to know much about the mysterious Flight 513. No one can say for sure whether they actually don't know anything or are just hiding something sinister. It's been established that the local government and its agents have extensively investigated the bizarre event. However, they refused to discuss anything about the ghostly airliner or any leads they had found during their investigation. They also refrained from commenting on Dr. Atello's theory that the plane had entered a time warp, so the government never really came out with any particular interpretation. Conspiracy theorists and paranormal enthusiasts, therefore, strongly believe that government officials swept this case under the rug. They allegedly cleared out all the evidence that time warps do, in fact, exist, and they did this because they don't want to scare the public. But this wasn't the first time something so unbelievable and otherworldly happened to a plane or a pilot. In fact, there have been numerous reports of pilots losing time and of people being teleported from one place to another that is thousands of miles away within a few seconds, without any rational explanation. There's not a lot of information about Santiago Flight 513 out there. If you search Wikipedia for the mind-boggling incident, you won't find anything. In fact, there isn't any sensational news story remotely resembling this one, or talking about Santiago Flight 513 or Pan American Flight 914. People are inclined to question whether it is legitimate or not, particularly because of the lack of proper evidence, except for the one and only piece in the tabloid or newspaper, which is not precisely verified either. Airplane enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists, however, are inclined to ask, if this engrossing tale wasn't just a mere hoax and was actually based on a real event, then what happened to the allegedly missing Santiago Flight 514 that carried 92 people? And is it really possible to go through a time warp and come back from it? On our planet, there are several creepy locations where aircraft, ships, boats, and even people have gone missing without leaving behind any traces. Some intellectuals are of the opinion that these places possess the ability to unpredictably form a type of time portal called a vortex. A vortex apparently is a result of an interaction with the parallel universe. This theory proposes that a vortex opens in another world, also called a parallel world, which consists of antimatter, and this can absorb people, masses, or even time and light. So this means that people who've gone suspiciously missing in this world without a trace have actually been transported to another world within a matter of seconds in our world. There are several different and remote places that are incredibly famous for such unexplained and creepy disappearances and bizarre incidents, like the Bermuda Triangle, the Devil's Sea Zone, and the Michigan Triangle. Many people believe that what happened to Bruce Gernon in the Bermuda Triangle might explain how and why Santiago Flight 513 disappeared and then reappeared 30 years later. Bruce is alleged to be the only person who survived the paranormal phenomenon occurring in the triangle. Over the centuries, the Bermuda Triangle has become notoriously famous for missing ships, people, and aircraft without any reliable explanation. Anything and anyone who disappeared in this region has never returned to tell the true story of what kind of evil forces lurk in the Bermuda Triangle. Well, except for Bruce Gernon, who allegedly survived the impossible. In real life, Gernon is the only person to make it out of the death zone alive. According to him, Gernon claims that he has experienced the time warp theory of the Bermuda Triangle and has lived to tell his story. He apparently witnessed the mystery behind the Bermuda Triangle unravel and knows what the triangle creates to make things disappear. Others also claim to have witnessed this phenomenon of mystery and disappearance, but Gernon has seen it completely. He said that he witnessed it from its birth stage, through maturity, and how it enters the heart of the time storm and escapes through a tunnel of the vortex, experiencing a time warp. Bruce Gernon allegedly flew a beach bonanza from Andros Airport, Bahamas, to Palm Beach, Florida, in December 1970. The two locations are 250 miles apart, and it takes a 47-minute flight to get from one place to the other at a consistent speed of 500 kilometers per h. For Gernon's small private plane, it was an impossible journey. He and his daughter, Rob McGregor, were on this flight. Gernon recalls witnessing a thick, extensive layer of extremely thick white fog that was approaching them at that time. His plane lost connection with the control center, and the compass and other devices on the aircraft also stopped working entirely. According to him, it all happened at once. He daringly decided to accelerate the plane towards the pile of fog in hopes of flying through it and reaching a clear sky. But as they entered the cluster, the air became denser, and within a few minutes, the plane was completely enveloped by the cloud, and visibility was reduced to 7 or 8 kilometers. There was no lightning or rain. However, Gernon does remember seeing white flashes that illuminated the sky. He rose to approximately 3,000 meters of altitude, but was still unable to get out of the cloud cluster. A few seconds later, he realized that his plane was trapped in the middle of a deadly cloud cluster. He had completely lost his sense of direction and didn't know where he was going. That was when he noticed a huge tunnel, at least 50 kilometers in diameter, appearing through the extraordinarily thick clouds. The visibility of the tunnel was incredible. He could see miles away through it. In this difficult situation, he took the risk and entered the tunnel. When he approached the opening, Gernon realized that it was a perfectly horizontal tunnel, just over a kilometer in length. He could see the blue sky on the other side, so he decided to head towards it. He was still quite baffled by the creepy density of the air and the cotton-like appearance of the clouds. He flew towards the exit, and after exiting the strange fog, Gernon realized that 30 minutes had passed, and he had flown 100 miles in a very short time in the vortex. It took Bruce 30 years to finish his research on the triangle, so that he could finally decipher how he had traveled those 100 miles in such a short interval without being able to see the earth or the sky around him. Gernon claims that it was because of something called electronic fog. He believes that he was captured by the electronic fog, and many other planes and boats have gone missing throughout history. He believes that this rare natural phenomenon could be the reason behind the paranormal happenings in the Bermuda Triangle. Some ufologists, conspiracy theorists, and paranormal researchers think something similar happened to Santiago Flight 513 and its passengers. However, this still doesn't explain why the people on the flight were reduced to mere skeletons, and how come one of those skeletons was still flying the plane. In the years since Flight 513's reappearance, several other wild theories regarding what may have happened to it have also surfaced. Some alien enthusiasts think that the plane was abducted by extraterrestrial beings. This theory is supported by the argument that there is no record of the plane or its occupants in the years between the disappearance and reappearance. The time warp theory is supported by the fact that the flight reappeared exactly after 30 years. Some believe that the aircraft landed on a remote island or was stranded in an uninhabited part of another country, where everyone on board died of starvation or dehydration. But this one doesn't explain how the pilot flew the plane back to its intended destination. All these theories seem quite far-fetched and unfathomable. This is why, to many out there, the parallel dimension theory is the only one that seems to make a little bit of sense. In recent years, there has been a growing body of evidence suggesting our universe is not at all random as we once thought. The understanding of time and space has massively changed over the last few decades. Several studies have shown that there are patterns and cycles in the universe that seem to defy the laws of chance. Whatever the truth about the disappearance and reappearance of Santiago Flight 513 may be, it is undoubtedly one of the most mysterious events in aviation history. It's likely that we will never find out what happened to this flight if it was actually real. The curious case of Santiago Flight 513 isn't the only one that left the entire world baffled. More recently, another airliner went missing, and what happened to it still hasn't been figured out. Back in 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 also known as MH370, vanished from the radar without a trace. The international passenger flight operated by Malaysia Airlines disappeared on March 8, 2014, while it was en route from Kuala Lumpur International Airport in Malaysia to its planned destination, Beijing Capital International Airport. The crew of this unfortunate Boeing 777-200, registered as 9MMRO, last communicated with air traffic control about 38 minutes after takeoff, while the flight was over the South China Sea. Minutes later, the aircraft was lost from the air traffic control radar screens. However, military radar did track it for another hour. Here, it was seen deviating westward from its planned flight path. It crossed the Malay Peninsula and the Andaman Sea. The flight left the radar range about 200 nautical miles northwest of Penang Island in northwestern Peninsula, Malaysia. The airliner was carrying 227 passengers along with 12 crew members. All of them have been presumed dead since then. The disappearance of Flight 370 has been deemed the deadliest incident involving a Boeing 777 and the deadliest in Malaysian Airlines history. But later on, it was surpassed in both regards by Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, which was shot down over the conflict-stricken eastern Ukraine while flying over the region in July 2014. The combined loss of two flights carrying hundreds of passengers caused immeasurable damage to Malaysia Airlines' reputation. They were facing financial problems, so the company was renationalized by the Malaysian government in August 2014. The search for the missing flight became the most expensive search in the history of aviation. It mainly focused on the South China Sea and the Andaman Sea. In the beginning, this was before the analysis of the aircraft's automated communications with an Inmarsat satellite, which indicated a possible crash site somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean. There was a lack of official information in the days following the disappearance, which prompted criticism from the Chinese and Malaysian public. The families and friends of the passengers were distraught and angry. Most of the people on board Flight 370 were of Chinese origin. Back in 2015 and 2016, several pieces of debris washed ashore in the western Indian Ocean. Much of this debris was confirmed to have originated from the unfortunate Flight 370. The search went on for 3 long years across 120,000 square kilometers of the ocean, but authorities failed to locate the aircraft. Finally, in January 2017, the Joint Agency Coordination Center heading the operation suspended its activities. A private contractor called Ocean Infinity launched a second search in January 2018 that lasted for 6 months and also ended unsuccessfully. The Australian Transport Safety Bureau initially postulated that a hypoxia event was the most likely culprit based on the analysis of data from the Inmarsat satellite with which the aircraft last communicated. However, no consensus has been reached among experts on this theory. During some stages of the investigation, authorities also considered possible hijacking scenarios, including crew involvement. The airplane's cargo manifest was also suspicious. Several disappearance theories have been speculated by experts and the media, but there's no definitive answer. The Malaysian Ministry of Transport issued an inconclusive final report in July 2018, but the report did highlight Malaysian ATC's failures to attempt to communicate with the plane shortly after it vanished. In case of the absence of a definitive cause of disappearance, the air transport industry safety recommendations and regulations, citing Flight 370, have been intended mostly to prevent a repetition of the circumstances associated with this tragic incident. By October 2017, 20 pieces of debris that allegedly belonged to 9MMRO were recovered from beaches in the western Indian Ocean. 18 of these items have been identified as being very likely or almost certain to originate from MH370. Texas A&M University mathematics professor Gung Chen has argued that MH370 may have entered the sea vertically, as any other angle of entry would have splintered the airplane into many pieces, which would have essentially been found already. It is quite evident that we will never find out what caused the unlucky MH370 flight to crash. Was it hijacked or shot down? No one can say for sure. Another plane hijacking with many unanswered questions occurred in 1971. However, even today, the hijacker of that flight hasn't been identified and has become a sort of legend around the globe. D.B. Cooper is a media epithet for the unidentified man who hijacked Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, a Boeing 727 aircraft flying in United States airspace in November 1971. During the flight from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington, the hijacker informed a flight attendant that he was armed with a bomb. He demanded $200,000 in ransom. which is equivalent to more than $1.3 million today. The hijacker also requested 4 parachutes. Upon landing in Seattle, after he released the passengers, the unidentified man instructed the flight crew to refuel the aircraft and begin a second flight to Mexico City with a refueling stop in Reno, Nevada. Almost 30 minutes after taking off from Seattle, the hijacker opened the aircraft's aft door. He then deployed the staircase and parachuted into the night over southwestern Washington. The incident happened almost 51 years ago, and to this date, the hijacker has not been found or identified. Later, in 1980, a small portion of the ransom money taken by D.B. Cooper was discovered along the banks of the Columbia River. After the money was discovered, public interest in this mysterious hijacker was renewed. However, the authorities could not find any additional information about his identity or his fate. The remaining money was also never found. While on the plane, the hijacker had identified himself as Dan Cooper, but because of a reporter's mistake, he became known as D.B. Cooper. For 45 years following the hijacking fiasco, the Federal Bureau of Investigation maintained an active investigation and built an extensive case file. However, they didn't reach any definitive conclusions either. The case of D.B. Cooper is considered the only unsolved case of air piracy in the history of commercial aviation. The FBI thinks Cooper didn't survive the jump from the plane for many reasons, including the inclement weather on the night of the hijacking, Cooper's lack of proper skydiving equipment, and his drop zone being a heavily wooded area. Cooper didn't possess detailed knowledge of his landing area. The ransom money also just disappeared, which means he never spent it. The FBI officially suspended the active investigation of the Norjack case in July 2016. However, reporters, enthusiasts, investigators, and amateur sleuths continue to pursue leads regarding Cooper's identity and his fate. The hijacking stunt by Cooper and several other imitators in the following years led to immediate and major changes in commercial aviation. Airport security measures were made stricter, metal detectors were installed, baggage inspection became mandatory, and passengers who paid cash for tickets on the day of departure were selected for additional scrutiny. All Boeing 727s were retrofitted with the eponymous Cooper vanes, which were particularly designed to prevent the aft staircase from being lowered. Because of these new security measures, aircraft hijacking incidents significantly decreased by 1973. During the first year of the investigation, the FBI used eyewitness testimony from the passengers and crew to develop sketches of Cooper. The first sketch was considered a poor likeness of the hijacker by the witnesses. However, by April 1974, the FBI had acquired the best likeness sketch of Cooper that they could develop based on the evidence and the hijacker's tactics. Investigators postulated that Cooper had carefully planned the entire ordeal. He seemed to have detailed and specific knowledge of aviation, the local terrain, and the Boeing 727's capabilities. He had chosen a seat in the last row of the rear cabin to observe and respond to any action in front of him. He also wanted to minimize the possibility of being approached or attacked from behind and make himself less conspicuous to the rest of the passengers. Cooper asked for 4 parachutes to ensure that the equipment he received wasn't sabotaged. He made the authorities think he would make 1 or more hostages jump with him. FBI agent Ralph Himmelsbach also pointed out that Cooper chose a bomb as his weapon to thwart any multi-directional attempts by the FBI to rush him. He was also quite careful and didn't leave much evidence behind before jumping out. He demanded that all the notes written by him or on his behalf be returned to him. Cooper was clearly aware, intelligent, and knew what he was doing, which is why many people think he actually got away with the hijacking and the ransom money. However, law enforcement authorities still have doubts about the success of his mission.